Right. So as a means of a quick introduction, I'm Daniel Revell-Wiseman. I'm joined today by my fellow Chartered Institute of Housing Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Group member, Bayo Igoh, and I have the pleasure of being able to ask Bayo some questions around ED&I, what his views are and what they mean to us as a sector. So Bayo, welcome. I'll just start with, if you could just provide a bit of background on you and your career to date, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Sure, thanks, Daniel. Firstly, thanks for arranging and having me on this interview. It'll be interesting to see how we get along. I used to work in housing. I think I started in 1991, London Borough of Housing, for Lambeth. And then I sort of did a number of different roles, from admin officer all the way to head of services. And my last port of call was the City of London Corporation. And then at that time, I decided that maybe another avenue that I felt passionate about in terms of supporting people, helping people, and getting people from A to B was through coaching and mentoring. So about 3.5 years now, going to its 4th year, I set up my own coaching and mentoring practice, and that's what I do as a day job.
Brilliant, thank you, Bayo. So the first question I had for you was, what was it or is it about housing that attracted you to the sector?
Long story short, I worked for a law centre and was intrigued at the number of cases that came. This is in the very early 90s, late 80s. Intrigued at the number of cases that came across our desk in regards to homelessness, housing management, repairs and maintenance, etc., etc. And I was young, I was ambitious, and I was definitely pretty militant, and felt, why aren't we fighting this battle from the inside? Why are we working as law centres, part of Law Centres Federation, etc., etc.? Surely one of us should be on the inside, doing it from the inside in. Naive, to say the least, but it was something that bugged me. And I think it was then forced upon me because I didn't actually become the lawyer that I wanted to be. I wasn't able to practice law, didn't get the articles, etc., etc. Then I thought, well, I know where I can go. I'll go and work for a local authority. Remember in those times, housing associations weren't as big as they are now, but local authorities definitely were. So I applied for a number of them, and lo and behold, my local authority in which I lived, the London Borough of Lambeth, after the second attempt, asked me in for an interview. And I was brought in and kindly asked to be an admin assistant, and that's what I did. Now, as I said, I was very interested in, and there were battles, there were arguments about what was right, what was wrong, the justice, etc., etc. But once you're in there, you then realize that it's a very big, complicated beast in terms of resources, in terms of needs, in terms of management, in terms of politics, in terms of the whole managed and delivery of that service. And I was quite fortunate in Lambeth, or for some people unfortunate, to see a number of different sides of how housing management is delivered. And luckily for me, very early on, as an admin assistant, I was then given the opportunity to be the PA to the then Director of Housing. I remember in those days we had typing pools, and so as an administrator, I was running around carbon copying this, watching this, and pretty effective, pretty efficient. And they just said, why don't we put Bayo up there for a 6-month interim role as the PA to the Director of Housing? And bang, wallop, that was it. Because I was then exposed to everything, from meeting councillors to going to different meetings with tenants and residents, politicians, contractors, other senior housing boards, junior housing boards, middle ranking housing managers. And I got the buzz. I got the real bug to be a housing board myself. And again, long story short, I applied to be a housing manager, a housing officer, sorry, that was what they were called in those days. Yeah, a housing officer. And then I did every role that you can do as a housing person. So from housing manager to team leader to housing services manager, contract manager, area manager, district manager, transitional manager as part of restructuring program. And then at that point, probably 12 years afterwards, decided that maybe I could learn more by going to another authority or a housing association, just to add that extra bit of information and knowledge about how I could be a better housing manager. And being an ambitious person as well, why not? So that was where the bug came from. my work as a legal locum in a law centre, and then working in housing across the board. It wasn't easy, but I loved it. It was up my street in terms of social welfare, understanding people, contracts, budget, the whole shebang of what was done on a day-to-day housing was what I liked and what I got involved in.
Thanks, Bayo. And so you got the bug, obviously, from well, all those housing tasks that we're all very used to, and I think, you know, we're all in the sector, and we certainly all have that bug. Well, I certainly do anyway. And in terms of, and do you think you make more of a difference the more senior you become within the service, or do you think it's actually it's those other things that you talked about in terms of the politics and the bigger beast actually weigh you down more? So actually, do you think that in terms of improving people's lives, particularly around equality, diversity and inclusion, do you think you have a bigger impact right at the front line as a housing officer, or do you think you can do that as a senior member of an organisation?
So while you were saying that, through my head, I was saying, got to be careful here, got to be careful here. But I'll say it as it is. I think as a housing officer, they were my best times, quote unquote, because I saw and felt the impact that I was delivering, be it positive or negative, to be fair.
Sure.
You know, a resident would say X, Y, and Z is bothering me, ABC is happening to me. And then depending on what time and resources you had, you could do something for that person directly. You were hamstrung, obviously, because it's the nature of the beast, you get hamstrung. But when you became a bit more senior, you were probably dragged more in terms of from pillar to post. You had to have a political antennae, political awareness as to what you could do, where you could do it, and how. And then you had to be more appreciative of, it's not one or two tenants or residents, it's hundreds, sometimes thousands. So one example is major works and capital works projects and how you communicate that to an area or even an estate. Communication is key, but there are various ways of communicating. Some will be involved, some will not be involved. Leaseholders will be more involved. And there was a hint, them and us, there was not in my backyard stuff going on. And then there's obviously the political will of senior stroke executive management and the political will of the political parties that run it, and then the government too. So I think in essence, the answer is you could be impactful at a very senior level if you knew how to engage the stakeholders at that level, and the stakeholders were myriad. But for me as a housing officer, definitely I enjoyed the battles with my managers in terms of getting things done. And I definitely enjoyed some of the battles we had with residents in getting things done, from antisocial behaviour, for example, to environmental services delivery. And obviously the roles and responsibilities tenants and residents had in terms of the agreement. Those were some of the good battles that you had. But the smile's always on your face when, you know, you go to a tenants residents meeting and they are slamming you hard in the public arena. But when you walk out and you're on the estate, they say, you know, it's not personal. We love what you're doing. It's great what you're doing, but we've got to let you know that's not enough. And that's how it worked. Once you started to realize it wasn't personal, and you would do in some meetings, you just needed to look at the bigger picture. So as you became more senior, the bigger picture became more relevant and more appropriate in terms of what I was trying to deliver.
Thanks, Bayo. So what does equality, diversity and inclusion mean to you?
So diversity in itself is a natural phenomenon. You can't get around it or above it. Inclusion is often a choice. And let's work with inclusion. There are myriad of things that we can do, have done in terms of bringing people around a table, around a political viewpoint, in order to understand the diversity that happens across the board, in terms of service delivery, in terms of people that are working for you, in terms of people that you're serving. But for me, it's around really understanding what can be done, how it can be done, and what more can be done to enable services to be the best that they can be. And I presume you're going to ask me a question in the future. What is it that we do? Paying lip service to stuff becomes very difficult, very challenging for service providers, but more so it becomes very difficult and annoying for the recipients of these services. I think for me, equality and diversity is understanding that in terms of delivering the work that we do, we need to be mindful of how we include the people that we're delivering these services for. Can't serve everybody in the same way, but equally, you might not have the resources to serve the people you would want to serve them. So the best way around that, or the best way to deal with that, is to be openly communicative about what it is you do and how it is you do.
Yeah. And so for you, there absolutely is a clear divide between, I don't think divide is the right word, but there's a clear difference between equality and inclusivity.
Yeah. Can we all be equal? We could be seen to be equal. We could be seen to be trying to do things for the best of the communities that we serve. But it is a choice still about how you create that inclusion. And it is understanding the choices, having those open discussions about the choices that better help the debate around equality and diversity, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is that understanding the needs of certain sectors, for example, the various protracted non-protected characteristics, having that debate with them and others about what and how we can deliver services is crucial. So if I look at my time now in what they call the private sector, working with small businesses, a lot of the time is spent on what resources do they have and what information do they have in order for them best to deliver the service that they deliver. And that can only be borne out by creating the dialogue in places and spaces where those conversations aren't necessarily had, and listening to both sides of those arguments before then saying, yeah, we should do all of these things for all of these people, because that's what we should be doing. Some people just don't have the means or the resources to do so. And we've got to be honest about that.
Absolutely. And do you think that the sector does enough in terms of ED&I? Yeah, and do you think that smaller organisations, as you say, don't have the resources, or do you think that larger organisations maybe pay more lip service? What's your views there?
Combination of the above. The smaller organisations, I've been fortunate enough to work in 2 housing associations which specifically geared up to the BAME. But even then, what does that mean necessarily in terms of service delivery? But here's an argument. The larger an organisation is, how much do they appreciate and understand the communities in which they work? How close to the ground are you in terms of knowing what is needed by the recipients of the services that you deliver? How often and how do you engage with the recipients of the services do you deliver? How flexible can you be, responsive, proactive to delivering the services that you want to deliver? And resident engagement and communication is key to that. But I suspect over the last 18 months, particularly over the last 2 years, over the last 10 years, with technological changes, how relevant can it be to a tenant and resident? Are you knocking on doors? Are you making those visits? Are you having those engagement in terms of meetings, social engagements, whatever it is, to address the needs of those people? Whereas if you're a big monolith, you're probably going to try and do things at scale. And at scale, you might not be directing what you're trying to direct to the people you want to give that information or service to. So my answer to the question would be, I think sometimes you need to use the technology, use the data that you have to identify the pockets of the communities that you want to work with and hone in them 110% of the time. There is a general information for everybody, definitely, and a specific information for people. You buy a newspaper, for example, it's not every page you want to read, it's aspects of that newspaper that you want to read. So you have a market for your various newspapers as well. And then within that newspaper, you have sections which are more familiar to you, are more favorable to you and that you want to go to straight away. That's my analogy in terms of service delivery. You have a big piece of information, but then you have specific pockets within that information targeted for specific people or for specific groups or specific parts of the community. But to get there, you need to know where and how and what part of the community needs what. Don't get me wrong, many organizations, housing associations, local authorities are doing that left, right and center in terms of enabling their services to meet the needs of the service users. But we could always do better. And that's what housing associations are doing, local authorities are doing, always trying to do better.
No, of course, I agree. And what responsibilities do you think that the CIH has in the sector in terms of ED&I?
Engagement, enablement, and empowerment. It's good to talk, so we talk to our members. It's good to empower them in terms of knowledge, experience, and education, so that they go out and spread the word further. And in terms of enabling these individuals, it's about giving them the tools and the resources to go out and do that job. So CIH's role is, I think, pivotal. I've been a member since late 90s for a number of reasons, and I still got involved, even though I left housing, because for me, it is the umbrella organization for practitioners. And therefore, we need to be seen to be doing things correctly. We tick boxing for the CIH is a misdemeanor. It's an oxymoron, because within the CIH, within housing, the complexities and diversities of the people that work there has to be well reflected through the CIH, not in just in what it looks like, but in what it tries to say, how it says it, and who it says it to. So as a lobbying organization, we need to be fighting is not the right word, engaging with government and other bodies to say, we believe this is what we should be doing. And that needs to be reflected in the communities we work in and the communities we engage in. So yeah, CIH has a massive, important role. And that's why the EDI group meets to, one, reflect the makeup of the people who deliver the services. More importantly, share best practice ideas, pros and cons. How, why did you do that? Where, when did you do that? Can we take that forward? Can we move that forward? And as you remember, Daniel, the recent conference that we had was a showcase highlighting the variety and spice of life in the services that we deliver and how we deliver it. But most importantly, and hopefully moving forward, what did we learn from that? Are our members actually putting those good practices into good effect? And my only bone of contention, and things may have changed, is how senior or how many senior executives or leaders within the housing organization are part of the CIH to help further drive that message within their own organizations. Consistency in terms of empowerment, enablement, and engagement.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think, both of us sit on the ED&I group. And for me, I think it's about thinking about equality and inclusivity in every meeting that we have at work, because actually every meeting we're having, more or less, should always impact residents or a group of residents. So therefore, we must be thinking about that in every meeting, I feel. And with that in mind, what more do you think individuals within their organisations could do about ED&I?
So really question the strategies that exist or don't exist.
Yeah.
Question the impact that the EDI that they have or don't have. Look at the data. Be open to criticism from service users. Be open to discussions with both service users and providers, internal and external. Be a critical friend of the organization. Stand up to be counted for. Call it out as you see it. Don't get me wrong, it took me donkeys, probably before housing services manager level, before I really stood up to call it out. Because you had to build your own confidence. You had to build your own space of not of invincibility, but what I'm saying, what I'm trying to do is right. And that only comes with confidence and support from others. So I thought one of the things is to build support networks within your organization and groups that share the same philosophy, vision, and values that you then use as a critical friend for the organization in order to move forward. That's what individual CIH members should be doing, be they members of the group or not. We are all in this together, kind of thing. And so you call it out as and where you see it. And if you're not sure, if you don't know, then ask the question. What are we doing about EDI? What does EDI? All the questions you've asked me, a member of staff should ask their line manager, who should ask their line manager, until it goes up to the chief executive and the board. What are we doing? What does it mean? Do we have a strategy? Is it just a tick box exercise? Give me examples of how it works in practice. Give me examples of what it looks like. Well, by the way, your board does not reflect the communities we work in. The executive team does or doesn't reflect the communities we work in. The services we provide does or does not reflect the services that we want to provide for the communities we work in. But those are good questions, but it's not a right or wrong. It's questions to be asked, to be answered by then putting into place what the community thinks it needs. And that doesn't happen overnight because, as we said in the beginning, time, resources, political will, and the ability to do so. But if you don't ask, you don't get.
No, of course. And I think that takes me really neatly onto the next question, really, which is just that, what we've spoken about, what individuals can do in their organizations. What do you think individual organizations can do in terms of ED&I? And do you think they're doing enough?
So I'm a bit removed, as you know, so 3 or 4 years out of it, still read various documents, papers and magazines and publications. The answer would be, over the last 18 months, 2 years in particular, with what's gone on, 3 major things and other things have gone on: Brexit, the pandemic, the fallout or the repercussions following the death of Floyd in the United States and Black Lives Matter, and then all the ancillary things that fall through that. Ask your organizations, ask yourself, in 2019, compare yourself now to 2021.
Yeah.
What have we actually been? What have we been doing? What did we say we were going to do in 2019? And what have we said and what have we actually done in 2021? Open, honest reflection. And, the G15, the G52, or place shapers, etc., all those various bodies that engage housing associations, that engage local authorities. You have a conference. We just had a housing conference. I didn't follow it. I didn't go to it. But the question would be, what questions were asked? What plan of action has been taken? How's it going to review, evaluated, and monitored? But most important, who's going to be held accountable, responsible for that? If we can't answer those questions, then yes, we have stood still.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think if there were just a set of, and they don't have to be very long, very many questions, but actually just a set of maybe 5 questions that if each organization or their chief exec or board could be asking themselves, and I think looking at those in more in depth, I think could do wonders for ED&I, I think within the sector. So what do you think the future holds for ED&I, for you as an individual and for the sector?
So the groups of people following us, coming behind us, have more information at their fingertips now. They are not going to be run roughshod. They are going to be asking more pertinent questions. They've got a number of different platforms to make a lot more noise than was done 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, definitely before I started. They're going to be more effective collaborations. They're going to be a more effective, calling these organizations to account. So I think in terms of EDI, it is going to be a lot more expectation and responsiveness from the organizations that deliver services across the board, public, private, voluntary, or whatever, because they're going to be asking the questions. And although we can feel that we're being run roughshod by certain elements of government, local authorities, and housing associations, the questions are still being asked. And organizations, governments, local authorities are still going to be embarrassed by the questions being asked. And it is that embarrassment that can lead to positive changes, positive U-turns, but more importantly, positive action, affirmative action, in order to deliver the services that the various groups would want to have better lives. So in housing, in terms of housing, what does better lives mean? You know, in my day, it was housing over your head, simple services, but it's more housing plus. So it is about social welfare, it's about social care, it's about the environment, it's about mental health, mental well-being, physical well-being. It is about the block, and all those things have an impact on the protected characteristic, and all those things have an impact on the EDI. And those individuals are not going to take it lying down anymore. They're just going to say, sorry, guys, it's not good enough. And we'll make noise. And the noise can and will embarrass certain organizations, but the noise can and will make organizations take heed and put the right actions into place, large or small.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Bayo, thank you for your openness and for answering the questions I had for you. I think it's important for us just to say that should anyone be watching this who wish to ask further questions of Bayo or myself, or wish to be involved in the ED&I group, details of how to contact us will be around or below this video. Equally, should you or your organisation wish to share some best practice with the group, and the CIH details on how to make contact will also be available. Bayo, thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Daniel. Much appreciated. See you at the next EDI group meeting.
Indeed. See you soon.